Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Shadowlands Alpha video. Yes, it's a very exciting time. We have got access to the Alpha. I have played the zone of Bastion. I've been playing around with really a lot of stuff in the Alpha, finding a lot of those just nice little things. And in today's video, you're going to get my first impressions of the Shadowlands expansion. Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time, and there's another pretty big video coming up on what the game director of World of Warcraft has said. Some really good stuff, so be sure to hit that sub button, hit that like button, because, yeah, there's going to be a lot of great content on the channel, and it's a very exciting time indeed. So, with that, let's roll. We're going to kick things off with the visuals because, well, I think the visuals are the one thing that's really just going to strike you immediately upon login. World of Warcraft, I think, is a gorgeous looking game, and I do think that Battle for Azeroth was gorgeous. Well, this time, we're seeing something very different, okay? So, BFA, that gave us zones that were a little bit more real-world feeling in some ways. Of course stylized, but you know what I mean, right? Towns and cities. Well, this is very, very different indeed. So already I think you get some brownie points because, yeah, it feels different. It's a change of pace, and I sort of like having that change of pace between expansions. Now, in comparison to other zones in the game, Bastion is, I would say, completely unique. Now, take Val'sharah, right? Val'sharah, yeah, it's beautiful, but it is just really an upgraded version of a Teldrassil or a Hyjal or an Ashenvale. Well, with this, we've not seen a zone that looks like Bastion ever before, and that is something that is just really nice. It does make this expansion, to me, actually feel more new. It's got that novelty factor, which is a really good thing to have. Now, when we actually jump into the zone, color palette. My god, the color palette of this zone is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. Now, especially, like, look at the grass. Right, the grass, the rolling hills. It is gorgeous, and it's all got this flow. Okay, so if you look at the way the grass is going, the way the trees are bending when you're in the overworld of Bastion, it's just got this beautiful visual language to it. It really, I think the best way to describe it is it just completely clicks with your eye, and that's when you've got all this flow, but then you've also got that matched up with incredible composition. Now, composition is the sort of thing that matters a lot in everything, but I think the composition work here is just so damn good. Just about no matter what way you turn your camera, you could pretty much take a screenshot and it would look like a bit of concept art. Like, that's slightly exaggerating one or two things. Of course, you could obviously take a really bad screenshot, but you get my point. No matter where you look, this zone is visually arresting. It's absolutely gorgeous and an incredibly strong addition to World of Warcraft. Now, that said, if we're to think about the other zones of this expansion, well, we of course have not experienced them yet on the Alpha. I do think Maldraxxus will be a little bit less interesting for me because it seems like it's more similar to what we've got in the past, but Revendreth, that could actually feel quite new depending on how it goes, and for Ardenweald, there is ample space to make that feel very different from the Emerald Dream and Ardenweald. Certainly, you know, the concept art of, like, you look up and you see all those, like, weird sort of blue, like, lines and stuff in the sky. It does seem like it'll be pretty unique feeling. And of course, there's Oribos and the Maw. So overall, I would say, visually, I am very impressed so far. We still do need to see more, but absolutely, this is getting, like, top marks from me in the visuals department. If we're then to move on to sound, I'm just going to keep this one a little bit more brief. I'd say that a lot of the music had a strong ambient feel for me. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes, you know, you're walking around the world and it just kicks in this really, really powerful, strong thumping music, and I can actually find that to be quite jarring. Personally, I prefer, say, the ambient soundtracks of the Burning Crusade. Would I listen to them on my phone? No, but I think as gameplay music, really, really strong. Now, for Bastion, yeah, I found there was actually just a lot of real nice ambient notes going on that really did make it an immersive place. So, in the music department, they are also getting very high marks indeed. Next, I'm going to cover some storytelling, but don't worry, I'm not going to go into any spoilers or anything like that. I'm more talking about the storytelling and the structure of things. So, in the Legion expansion, right, you could do any zone in any order. And when you went around those zones, they often, I mean, they did have a strong core narrative in some cases. In other cases, a little bit less so, right? But if you then go into, say, Battle for Azeroth, I think the zones felt really often very fragmented in their storytelling, especially, say, Stormsong Valley. Well, here, it feels closer to Warlords of Draenor. Now, I know loads of people are going to go, WoD! Oh no, that's the bad expansion. I mean, yeah, WoD was pretty pants once you hit max level and got your garrison done, but I'll tell you this. I think Warlords of Draenor had incredibly good storytelling for World of Warcraft in its leveling. Now, yes, the middle part of many of its character arcs were cut out because a patch was basically cut, but that way that you were, say, following Yrel and the sort of band of people through, say, Shadowmoon Valley, right? And it kind of felt like you were playing a really strong narrative campaign. It had a really good sort of thumping pace to it. That was something that I really liked. But of course, it was then offset by you having side quests and other things you could do in different areas. Well, yeah, that's basically what's going on here. When I was playing through Bastion, there was a core campaign that I was going through. It was well paced. It did not feel like it had loads of filler dragging it down. If I wanted to go and do side quests in other areas, I seemed to be able to, right? There was regular quest markers that I didn't have to pick up. And that meant that I could really get into the flow of the story that Blizzard were telling in the zone. So I think that's really strong. But then we've got to take it in a little bit more context, and that is that when you're leveling through these zones your first time, right, in Shadowlands, well, they're going to be in a linear order. Now, you will be able to do them in any order on your alts because you will have experienced the story, but what makes me excited about the way that they're doing it now is, yeah, it seems like you're getting a way more tight story within each zone, and then those stories flow together in a linear progression, so that you really get a long narrative arc, instead of, say, Battle for Azeroth, where, yeah, you got the story of 3 different zones, but they couldn't really tie into each other that much, sort of in terms of time, because they basically, lore-wise, would have all had to have been taking place simultaneously, because you could have done them in any order. So overall, to me, I think that's a really strong storytelling strength for this expansion, and I actually suspect that it may do a better job of introducing characters because of that. Certainly, they will have the ability to introduce a character in, say, Bastion, and then develop that character over time. Now, whether they'll do that or not, I don't know, but certainly from what I've played so far, I was impressed with the storytelling. I felt more engaged than I was in the BFA storytelling of its zones, so overall, they're getting pretty good marks from me as well. Then next, I want to go into something that's sort of related to that, and that is the quest UI. This is something they've actually quite significantly revamped. So, well, right, I was just talking about the primary sort of campaign quests and then just the secondary ones. Well, those secondary quests have just got your regular exclamation mark on the head of the NPC. However, you can see this sort of question mark inside a crest sort of shield thing, like a different icon. And that's the icon that denotes whether something is a campaign quest. So, if they're doing that, that means that, yeah, it's really clearly sort of denoting where you're going and what you're doing. And I've got to wonder, if that's going to be applied then back to the old world, is that going to mean that you can get a more sort of tight narrative experience with better pacing as you're going through those zones? I suppose I would say so, and if I'm going to think about another game, I remember playing Star Wars The Old Republic at launch and just finding it was this big old soup. But then way later on, I went back to that game and they had implemented a similar system where the core, campaign quests had a different marker, right? And that meant you could just progress straight through by doing those. And it felt really good there. I'll say this, it feels really, really good in World of Warcraft. And it means that, say, if I'm leveling an alt and I've got some heirlooms, maybe an XP potion, right? So I'd normally be leveling very, very, very fast. Well, this way, I could do that. I could just follow the core story and have a really good time. So basically, this is a UI sort of change, and I guess a little bit of an idea change in how Blizzard are representing their things that should help to guide people through a better narrative experience. I mean, even if you look at your objective tracker, you've got campaign, and then you've got quests. It's really, really clear what is the campaign of each zone. So I think that's really good. Then also, there is the 3D marker for finding things, and you'll see that around in some of this footage. It wasn't massively useful in the first half of Bastion, which seemed to be all that I could play because there was a quest step where I'd try to go to a place and it would teleport me back to another place, so it seems like there was an artificial barrier placed there by the devs. But yeah, right, there was one time I was in a cave. It was a very simple cave, so I didn't need the 3D marker, but those times you're in a cave in Teldrassil, one of those barrow dens. You're lost, you're confused. I mean, maybe not for us experienced players, because we've then realized they're all the same copy-paste cave, but for new players, I think that might be something that's quite good. Now, I will say, it's a very big departure from the classic style of slowly exploring things and getting lost, But, I mean, yeah, for how modern WoW is as a modern game, yes, it's actually a very, very good, very useful feature, and I think if you want that older style, well, thankfully, Classic is there to allow for that. Then finally, on the sort of narrative and experiential side, I just want to talk about the Covenant fantasy, and I'm going to do this in as spoiler-free a way that I possibly can, so I'm not going to mention characters, I'm not going to mention plot developments or anything like that, but the basics of the Kyrians, which are the ones that we've sort of played around with, is that they're kind of there in servitude, but a part of their sort of rising up to ascending is getting rid of all of their burdens. Okay, so you might just think, okay, that's just some, real, like, they sit down, they meditate, whatever. Oh no, the Kyrians are pretty damn hardcore about this, because a burden for them can be, like a really bad experience, a traumatic memory, but it can also be a really good memory, okay? Because if you perhaps have a really good memory of your time with your family, well, for the Kyrians' perspective, that's actually just tying you back to your old self and making you less of a good Kyrian who is there to serve and has a very clear purpose. So while the Zone of Bastion has got all of this shining, glistening gold everywhere and everything looks perfect and idyllic and serene, Blizzard have actually done a pretty good job of trying to have a commentary on, burdens and things like that, but also by just putting a little bit of darkness into that. Because it would have been very easy for the Kyrians to have just came across as, oh, they're the shining good guys in gold. And there's another bit they do with the character that I'm not going to mention here that sort of reinforces that I did quite appreciate. So it seems like, yeah, if you would have just thought that, oh, the Kyrians are the goody two-shoes and the Maldraxxus people are the, ooh, angry people, very bad, definitely for the Horde. No, it does not feel like that whatsoever. So I'm actually glad there is more nuance there than I expected. And yeah, I'm definitely impressed and quite pleased indeed. And with that covered, let's go on to gameplay. So I played Enhancement Shaman. Why did I play Enhancement Shaman? Well, it's got a lot of changes and I basically hated it in BFA. Now, the funny thing is, I liked it decently in Legion just because it had great spell effects, a great fantasy, and then, all of its artifact weapons and just all of that stuff. But then once you got into BFA, Blizzard, they changed it up so that you were generating such a ridiculous amount of resources and you were just sitting there capping resources all the time. It didn't really feel that good, and that's why I decided, based on playing it in alpha and beta of BFA, that I had zero interest. So I was actually really happy that I hopped back into that spec now and found that it actually felt really good. I was putting down my Wind Fury totem. Yes, I think that might have Preach and Bay weak at the knees, but I put down my Wind Fury totem, and I'm doing shaman things, right? I've put my totems down, I've got more buttons. That's another pretty cool thing. Yeah, it felt really nice. I'm going to have to see, what other specs feel good there, but so far, I think a really good improvement. Now, what's funny is if you look at your spell book, you actually see, and man, this is so funny, you see your shaman abilities, and then you see your enhancement abilities. And you are going to pick things from your shaman abilities, put them in your hotbar, and actually use them. Yeah, that's just the UI really just sort of reinforcing the idea of you being a spec of a class instead of just being the spec, but it is very, very welcome and appreciated. Now, that said, there is one negative thing to talk about. So we've just got a whole bunch of buttons back, okay? And some of those buttons are going to be cooldowns, right? Offensive cooldowns that we're going to use to power up our future abilities. But the thing is that, well, the GCD changes of the last expansion are still in. Now, those GCD changes, do they matter that much when you're just hitting your very regular core rotation? No, not really. But do they matter a lot more when you're using a lot of, buffs and things like that? Well, yes, they do matter a fair bit more. And I will say there's times where I was playing my shaman and, yeah, honestly, it did not feel that good because of the GCD situation. As an example, I had my Kyrian ability, which is a totem. So I'd, want to put that down. Maybe I'd want to call out my wolves, and maybe I'd be putting down my searing totem and using you've got a new buff. It's right. It's one of those buffs that's like a weak enough melee attack, but what it really does is it powers up your searing totem and your flame shock. So it's kind of like using 4 buffs in a row. And that just feels really bad because while I'm sitting there using those 4 buffs, what's happening? My rock biter's recharging, it just doesn't feel as tight, right? I think it really hurts the pace of the specs. And I actually think that the inherent problems of the GCD change are actually more prevalent now that we're getting more buttons back, because there's more opportunities for that GCD to be invoked in a situation where it being invoked doesn't really feel that good, especially after having played World of Warcraft in, say, you know, mop through Legion. So there you go, that's what's up. But I will say, yes, enhancement felt a bit better, and in terms of gameplay, yeah, I felt pretty good about it. Then another element of gameplay is, of course, the squish, because man, we have been squished. My Storm Strike is dealing, what, 800 damage now? So that's a fair bit less. Yeah, we're dealing way less DPS. Mobs have less health. We start off at level 50. Level 60 is the cap. And my item level when I started off was like 70-something. I mean, wow, the numbers are a bit more back to being sane, and I actually really do like that. Now, what I think is really important, though, is that Blizzard manage the inflation of that. You know, the inflation really started to increase in pace with Titan Forging and the way that they started doing their raid tiers. Well, with Titan Forging not being a thing, I've got to wonder if that means that Blizzard can slow down the numbers inflation and just give us like 2 or 3 expansions of reasonable numbers before they've got to revisit that problem again. So yeah, the core here for me is I actually like how the squish feels. I generally do like the smaller, more readable numbers, so I'm pretty happy about that. Then another thing to talk about that will impact all of us is the Covenant ability. And I suppose these Covenant abilities, I mean, yeah, they're our main new way of getting abilities in this expansion. We'll each get a generic one for the Covenant and then one for our class. In my case, as a Shaman, the Kyrian thing is a totem. And I put the totem down, and basically my next 3 damage spells will cause it to radiate AoE damage. My next 3 healing spells will cause it to radiate a heal. I'll say this, putting it down and then, you know, doing a crash lightning and then doing like 2 storm strikes, wow, it felt really good to use. Its heal also felt really good to use. But that also does mean that it feels really very core to the spec indeed now that I have it. Like, it feels like something that I would really be focusing on. It feels super strong. In this one, it's got such strong AoE, especially in, say, a dungeon situation. So that does make me worry a little bit about the Covenant abilities being tied to the Covenant that's supposed to be a very impactful choice that's not easy to swap about. Now, in a recent interview, Ian Hazzikostas, of course the game director of World of Warcraft, did say that they think there is value in making a big choice like that, but they do see the community feedback, and that right now their thinking is that they pretty much would be prepared to relent on that and to just let us swap between those abilities if we wished. They would be prepared to relent on that, but they first want to try saving the system and getting what they want to work. So I would say there, yeah, fair enough. That's what's Alpha for. That's what the Alpha's for. I really like that frankness and that honesty. I'm absolutely going to advocate for Blizzard to change because I do believe it's the right move for them to make for the long-term health of the game. But there you go. I'm worried about the being locked into the choice and that stuff, but I'll say, yeah, when I was playing my Enhancement Shaman, I found the ability to be quite fun to use in terms of it just adding another little thing for me to do every minute while I was executing my rotation. So, good stuff. And then to really just end my first impressions of playing the alpha, I want to just step back and take it a little bit meta. So there's a lot of things that I like here. I mean, we logged in, we can make a level 1 character to test out the new player experience, which, by the way, really does seem to be quite great, especially in teaching people core mechanics for World of Warcraft. I mean, wow, actually bothering to teach players how their class works and the things they should be doing in their class. Pretty incredible and nice to see at the beginning. But anyway, yeah, so we've got level 1s, so we can test that. We've got level 50 pre-made, so we can test this zone. Blizzard have made a commitment to doing pre-mades in general so that they can do targeted testing. That's great. As somebody who cares about the quality of World of Warcraft, that makes my life easier when it comes to actually hopping in the alpha, doing research and seeing what's up. So that's really good. Then the other thing, better communication. We have got a series of blog posts from Blizzard, which have all been really good, especially Ian's first one, which was just very frank and honest that I liked. Then he hopped on Slootbag's stream right when Alpha dropped and gave a great interview. Like a really great interview. And there was like a few times where, yeah, Ian seemed a bit uncomfortable. I don't mean uncomfortable with Sloot or anything. I mean just, you know, like he was really going into the territory of talking about the harder elements of the game, the harder choices they've had to make. And that was really good to see. This seems like a WoW team that's just communicating very differently to how they did in the past. I mean, like, they basically admitted that with Azerite gear, they kind of disregarded feedback
because the version on the alpha and beta was, just behind what they had internally. And then also just a situation of like the players not really having the full version of the system, so their feedback not really being, sort of superheated to because of that, and just things like that, which, I mean, if you're actually there admitting that on a stream saying, hey, yeah, that system did not work out that well, we really could have done a better job listening, we're committing to listening a lot more now. He talked about them being a lot more willing to, say, change pace on the Covenant ability lock thing. He even said in the GCD that right now they are sticking with the GCD, but they want specific feedback of when the GCD changes of BFA actually feel bad in the context of Shadowlands. So that's what I just gave today in this video, but it's nice that he's asking for that. This is so much better communication than we got with BFA. Like, the BFA alpha through beta was an absolute damn shambles. I still remember the very first time that, and it's because I re-reviewed my old video a few days ago, it was the very first time that Azerite gear went live onto the alpha of Battle for Azeroth, and there was just terrible communication. We didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know we kind of just got it without that much context, and it meant that our feedback and our testing was useless. That's not what's happening this time. I mean, even as soon as this alpha build went up, they put up a blog post saying, here's what's in this build, here's roughly what's in the next build, and then here's the things we're going to roll out after that. So good. Helps all of us so much. So that truly, it's this meta stuff that has me a lot more excited about Shadowlands, because look, I know that Blizzard can make a really nice zone. I know they can do great art, great music, and all of those things, but the thing that I honestly have not trusted them to do is to listen to their community, and I have not trusted them on basically the design of the game, right? I've not trusted them there. I've not trusted them when it comes to systems. Like, that's basically what's up, and the mechanics through which I've not trusted them is pretty darn simple, because the communication has sucked, and I felt like concerns have just went unlistened to for such a long time. But if we combine what they said at BlizzCon, what they said about alts recently, where Shadowlands was just better in all regards for alts, yeah, it seems like this is, look, whether this is a new Blizzard or more just a Blizzard that's realized it's going to run itself into the ground if it's, continually just does not listen to its players and kind of just, blindly charges forward. I mean, that doesn't matter. What matters now is we want a good game, the devs want a good game, and it seems like the players and the devs, in this case the testers and the devs, are going to be far more in sync with each other so that we can help each other out. I mean, like, I do know that the surveys that I'm doing, yeah, I got a good response whenever I told them about that. Obviously, don't want to share any private communications or anything like that, but I'll say this, the response was pretty much like, oh, nice, thanks. The devs would appreciate that, it'll be passed on. So, this is great. This is honestly great, and this does fill me with a lot of hope. So there you go. That is my first impressions of World of Warcraft Shadowlands from playing, a spec, going through a zone, seeing the core changes, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this one, especially because, and this is the thing that matters the most, the mechanics of improvement are better because the dev team is actually listening. Man, that feels really good to be able to say with actual belief and honesty that this really is the case. That makes me just so happy.
So, there you go. That's my first impressions of the Shadowlands expansion. Yeah, certainly things are off to a great start, and as you're going to see very shortly in another video coming up on this channel, well, yeah, they've also said a whole bunch of really good stuff that bodes so well for the end game. Health of WoW. So, thank you very much for watching. If you want to help us out, help out our team, you can check that out over on the Patreon. It's especially helpful in these times of the global situation, halving ad revenue, which is a little bit stressful. And of course, hit that sub button. We will get some pretty good content out to you over the coming days and weeks. Thank you. Let me know about what you saw. And with that, I'll see you next time.